exposure to them. Won't be on your final or anything, but the network's generally pretty slow today, so that's what we're going to do. So everyone opened up their Jupyter Notebook. Then find a place to put your work. So I always keep a COP2030 folder somewhere. You can even make a new folder in here, I think. So I can do new folder 12/4/2019. Show up. I'll be lazy. And then once you have that, let's do a new Python 3 notebook. Now, normally when I run a Python program, how do I run it? I run it from beginning to end. What's cool about Jupyter Notebook is that we have these individual little cells and we write little bits of code. But all this is one single program, but just imagine that. So if I write a variable in one cell, it's available in the next cell. So don't think that each little cell is a complete program. It's just little chunks of a program that I can run, because that's very often the case in data science. This is not an uncommon scenario, is that I write something very, very CPU intensive that might take 2 hours to run. And then I want to take that result and I want to interactively do some things with it. Imagine if I wrote a program that every time it ran, I had to create that model that took 2 hours. It'd be very, very difficult to experiment with things. But with this, I run the cell, I create that model, and then in the next cell, I can do any sort of experimentation I want with that model interactively. So it's a pretty cool thing. But we're going to use it for a different purpose today. We're just going to use it for to finish out our review. So if you remember, we left off with lists. By the way, has anybody in here heard of Markdown? I think it's getting more and more popular on the internet. I think various like message boards and stuff use it. What message boards use it? Reddit. Okay, that's where people probably know it from then. But it's pretty cool because we can use that to document our code. So let's say for Markdown, I want to do lists and loops. So by the way, you probably didn't realize I did this. To execute a cell, what you do is you hit Shift Enter, and it sees that. It says, "Oh, okay, that's Markdown now." And then this is my little section where I'm going to talk about lists and loops. Now, if you remember, to make a list is very similar to an array, but it's actually internally it's a little bit different. Think of it as like a dynamic array that I can expand as large as I want to. And so, if I had my list, let me make this a little bit larger here, and let's just give it some random numbers. Let's say let's give it names. Alice, Bob, Charlie. And you hit Shift Enter, and that gives me a new cell. Now, if I want to, what's cool about this is I can do print my list and hit Shift Enter. But let's say I just wanted to briefly print that list. That cell, I can go back and modify it. So I can say, okay, we printed the list, we saw the things, but now I want to actually do a for loop on that list. So I say for item in my list, and then let's print item. So don't think that these cells are limited to one line of code. In practice, you usually have like anywhere from like a couple lines of code to about 20. 20 is kind of the limit. If you get past that, you're probably putting too much in a single cell. Okay, so you get the basic idea of Jupyter Notebooks. Actually, maybe in the future, when I give examples, maybe I should just start using these Jupyter Notebooks instead of REPL. That way I can put documentation here as well that aren't comments. Anyway. And it's cool because Markdown supports, you can do links, you can do all kinds of really cool things with Markdown. You can put images in there, so all kinds of interesting things. Okay, so this is how we do a loop, is that we've got this idea of a list, and then we iterate over that list, and we say for thing in list, and then that's how we get all the things inside of that. I want to kind of stay focused, because when we did lists originally, we talked about different ways to iterate over lists and stuff like that. I want to stick to just how we did things in assignments. That way we can just kind of finish out the day. Don't forget, for everyone, next class is the final exam. Same exact rules as the midterm, okay? and I'm gonna pick 2 questions based off of assignment 4 and 5. Let's see, that's a good stopping point. No, I'm sorry. Let's do. I don't think we had anything list based on the midterm, did we? Or did we? I don't know. Let's look. Hopefully I didn't zip protect the exam, which I might have. It's really slow today. I guessed it. Okay. Okay, so we did do lists. Okay, so your exam will be based off of 5 and 6. Okay, so you have to do something with a dictionary and then something with a class. Okay, so your exam will be based off of 5 and 6. So that's how you loop over a basic list. Let's go ahead and solve assignment number 5. Okay, so I'm going to go in here. I'm going to copy this. So these are the students I had. Can I shrink this a little bit? I'm just running out of room too quickly. Is this okay for everyone? Okay. And I do Shift Enter. So I've got all my students. And I've got a dictionary. Remember how dictionaries work? It's what's called key value pairs. And so if I want to keep things simple, I can point John to another string. But remember, we went through that whole process of we got more and more complicated, that John actually points to another dictionary. Same thing with Mary. All these people point to a dictionary. Okay, so so print all the students' names using a loop. So I know to loop over the students, I'm going to do a loop. I'm going to say for student in students. And then let's just start off there. Let's just print student. So when I loop over a dictionary like this, it's going to give me back the key. Now, if you remember, I can get back the key value pair. I call items. I think that's the method name. So that was to print all the keys in the dictionary. Now let's do a slight modification of this. What happens if I print students, and then I look it up by key? You can see here that returns back a dictionary. So I know that the name points to a dictionary. Perfect. Print all the email addresses. Okay, so I know again, I'm going to have to loop through. I'm going to say for student in students. Now what I could do is I could say students, student, but you might find that a little bit a little too verbose, maybe. So what we can do is there's this method called, I think I'm pretty sure it's items. And that gives us back a key value pair. So we say key val, and the key is going to be the student name. The value is going to be a dictionary. And just to make sure I actually use that right, let's go ahead and print up the val. That should be the dictionary. Perfect. I print up the key. It gives me the names. Perfect. So now if I say val, that's going to be the actual dictionary. And then within that dictionary, I just want to know the email. So I go ahead and run this. Oops, I have to actually print it. print. That gives me back all the email addresses. Okay, everyone good so far? Because I know dictionaries, this is kind of where we got a little bit more complicated. So when I loop over a dictionary, it's going to give me back the keys. But if I call this items, it's going to give me back the key, what's called a key value pair. It's going to give me back the key, which is the names, and then the value, which is a dictionary. Then once I get that dictionary back, I looked in the dictionary and I said, okay, I want, basically it's giving me this part each time. And I said, okay, within that dictionary, get me the email address. And we can see here it just gives me the emails. So next we have to create a student named Bob. So we're going to say student. And I wanted you to do it in 4 lines of code. So we start off with an empty dictionary. And then this person has an email. I'm sorry, I used the full word student. I'm going to be lazy. I'm just going to use S. Do we call it phone number or just phone? Phone, okay. So we needed an email, a phone, and then the address. So that created the student, and then now how do I add it to my students dictionary? I just say students Bob is equal to S. Now with a list, if I wanted to add something to the end of the list, how would I have added that? What's the method name, the special function that we use to add to the end of the list? It's called append. So there we have to actually call a function name, but here we just say that Bob is equal to this. So S is a dictionary, and then we've said that Bob, within the student's dictionary, that Bob is equal to that dictionary. Now, just to make sure that we've done it correctly, let's just print all students. And we can see Bob right here was added. So Bob points to a dictionary just like everyone else does. There's a way to pretty print this. I can't remember what it is. You can call see this pretty prints. Yeah, doesn't help. Okay, so we'll just leave it as students. Okay, and then finally we had single line of code, print Mary's phone. So we have to go into the student's dictionary. We have to get Mary's dictionary, and then we want to get her phone number. We asked for the phone. And then we have to actually print that. Oops, are these capitalized? Yeah, that's right, messed up. Yeah, so it's by the way, that's good that happened, and actually I guess Bob should actually be capitalized too then if that's the case. You want to be consistent. But these keys are case sensitive, okay? And usually we use strings, but you can use other objects, but most of the time we tend to use strings. Now let's use that to print Mary's phone. Any questions about this? So look that over for a second just to make sure that you're good with that. I just so everyone's aware, I just want to make sure I post this as an announcement. So we said 5 and 6. Okay. So any questions about that? It's pretty clear. I think most people finish that assignment without too much problems. So just make sure to review that. Think about the various little changes I could make to that, okay? And just be comfortable with dictionaries. And not just a simple single level dictionary, multi-level dictionaries. Remember when we did the HTTP client, the requests library? Remember we had something like this where we had to actually poke inside the... So we got back a result, but the base result gave us like metadata. It told us which page we're on, how many results per page, things like that. Then from there we had to go inside there and grab the dictionary data, which actually contained the user. So make sure you understand that concept of that. When we've got dictionaries embedded inside of dictionaries, like if I wanted to get John's email, I have to first go into the student's dictionary and grab John's information, but John is going to return a dictionary, and that's what we ended up with here with Mary, is that we go to that dictionary, get Mary's information. Well, Mary's information turns out to also be a dictionary, and then say, within that dictionary, get me the phone number. Okay, so this next one will be assignment number 6. Don't forget, you can use all your notes and everything. So I'm telling you ahead of time that the questions are going to be based off of the assignments. So use that to your advantage. Okay. Now, in this assignment, basically, I told you start with the example that we did on this day. So here's the example we did that day. Oh, okay. And then this is, remember, we got the exception. So I'm just going to come at that exception for now. And if you remember, this was using classes and dictionaries together. So this idea of object-oriented programming, I have a class of something, and then within that class I have variables, and then I have this thing called a constructor. Now, in it's my constructor. So I have a cart, a shopping cart, and then down here, so this is our blueprint of a shopping cart. Down here I actually create a concrete instance of it. Now I have this dictionary of inventory where if I want to know information about an apple, I can get its price and when it expires. And then because I want this to be generic, when I create a new shopping cart, essentially I'm creating like a new store or something like that, I can pass in my inventory as a dictionary. That's nice because that makes cart generic. I can reuse this cart class and just pass in different inventories based on, you know, what I'm selling. And then we have this add method. And so what I'm doing is I'm adding things to the cart. Don't forget we have this self variable at the beginning. And then what I do is I add in our individual shopping cart items that we want to purchase. Now the first thing that we did here was you check to see if it was expired. So because in my constructor, I took that, I stored it in inventory. So first of all, I initialized the total to 0, and then I have my inventory. So it's essentially I'm keeping track of two things. The total price of my shopping cart, and my inventory. And I use that inventory to look up things to add to that total. So I have this method here called add, and don't forget that these methods always start with this self variable. And then I'm going to add something. And so here I need to look it up. Now to get those variables inside of the class, we have to use this special self keyword. So I do self dot inventory, and then I look up that thing that I want to find. In this case, it's going to be an apple. So I look up the apple. I look to see when it expires, and if remember, we just said that today is date 100. Whatever 100 means, it doesn't really matter what it means. If that expiration date is less than 100, I'm going to raise an exception. And remember, when I raise an exception, none of this code runs. So if I get to this line right here, it means that everything ran fine. And then what I do is I do a plus equals. Remember, plus equals just increments. And I know the price because I can go to the inventory. I can find the apple and then look up the apple's price. So it goes to apple, its price, it's going to be $1.05, and I want to add that to the existing total. Right now, when we start off, the existing total is nothing. Okay. So just make sure, I know it's been a little while, make sure you understand how classes work. This idea that we have something, it's object-oriented programming. The idea is to describe the real world. And so I've got a shopping cart, and that shopping cart has two things. It has variables and it has functions. And the variables are for the whole shopping cart. So I created a shopping cart, and every time I call add, that variable carries over. Now to access any of these, I always have to start off with this, this self keyword. Okay. Now we had an assignment based off of this. And it was similar. It was a toll booth. So I think I called it. So let's take this one piece at a time. Okay. So I know ahead of time that this was going to be our starting example. So let's change this from cart to toll booth. And this dictionary is going to represent all the vehicles. So I know I'm going to need this dictionary at some point, maybe not right away. Now we can actually be clever with this. What I can do is I can put this in another cell. So I can put the vehicles in that cell. So my class is in this cell. The vehicles are down here. This lets me work on the toll booth by itself. And so it's going to take in a license plate number. So rather than adding an item, I want to take in, oops, pasted it in bad. I want to be able to charge a license plate number. Now looking at this vehicles dictionary, I know that to look up a car, I start by its license plate number. So we're going to change this from inventory soon. But the basic idea is that I'm going to be able to use this LPN. So we're not having a food name anymore. We're having a license plate number. So they give me a license plate number. I go to this dictionary and I look up when the vehicle registration expires. And then rather than item expired, you can write like registration is expired, I guess. Or vehicle tag is expired. So we assume that today's date was 100, which we already did. And then now the basic idea is that every time, and let's change some of these variables. So I'm not going to have inventory anymore. I'm going to have vehicles. So let's change some of these names as well. So I've got my toll booth. When I first start up the toll booth, it gives me all, like this is our whole DMV database. It's only 3 cars, but let's just pretend, you know, this could potentially be millions of cars. And I pass in, for my toll booth, the whole vehicle registration database. Then when I go to charge a toll, you give me the license plate number, and I can give you whether it's a car or a truck and when it expires. And so when I go to charge a toll, first thing I want to know is that vehicle tag actually expired or not. So this gets a little bit tricky because now we don't have the price directly. I'm saying if it's a car, it's going to be a certain price. If it's a truck, it's going to be another price. So the idea is going to be that rather than looking up the price directly, what I want to do is, let's start off with the car. I know that a car, I'm going to increment, did I say $1? Yeah. So a car, every time I see a car, it's going to increment $1. How do I know that it's a car? Well, I have to look it up. I have to say if self, and by the way, I have to change it here too. So all instances of inventory, I'm changing it to vehicles. So if I go to our vehicle registration database, which is going to be in self.vehicles, I look up the license plate number, and then I look up the type. I want to know if it's a car or a truck. Well, I know that if it's a car, then I want to increment by $1. And if it's a truck, I want to increment by $1.50. Now, some of you may have gotten very clever with this and then thrown in like else and then throw an exception, unknown vehicle type or something like that. I wouldn't require you to do that on the exam. So let's go over this logic again. We've got a toll booth. When I initialize the toll booth, it's like you give me your vehicle registration database, which happens to be a dictionary. We want to track the total amount of money collected at that toll booth. So inside of the constructor, remember this init, this is the constructor. We say, okay, starting off at the beginning of the day, we haven't received any funds. We started off at 0, and you passed me the vehicle registration database. Now, when a car goes to pass through, I can, first of all, I want to check to see, you give me the license plate number, I can look up that vehicle, and I can tell when it expires. So we're going to see if the tag is expired or not. We said that today is 100. It's just a made-up date. It's just easier to deal with numbers than having to get into the date time module again. And if we've gotten to this line right here, we know, okay, that the tag hasn't expired. So I can go ahead and actually charge this vehicle a toll, not have, the value error that might be, send them another ticket or something. There might be some alternate code path that we would take. And so if it's a car, we can look it up. We have this vehicle registration database. They gave us the license plate number, so we look up the license plate number. Well, what does license plate number return? Another dictionary. So inside of that dictionary, we go to the type. And that type's going to either return car or truck. So we know that if it's a car, we want to increment by $1. Else if it's a truck, increment by $1.50. I think that's pretty much all the logic. And then I said write some code to test it. So we can say that C1. So first we needed a toll booth. And to that toll booth, we want to pass in the vehicle registration database. So we pass in vehicles. And then we're going to create car 1. Sorry. I think this is actually all we have to do because we didn't create a car class. Okay. So we have our toll booth. And now we can test. We can say, okay, toll booth dot charge toll, and then we pass in a license plate number. So we'll start with this license plate. Next license plate. We know that third license plate is going to be expired. So let's just go ahead and, because we know the program's going to fail, let's go ahead and print the toll booth, the total. Remember, we can access variables directly. We have that total variable, and it's $2.50, which makes sense because we had a car and a truck. So 1 plus 1.5, that's $2.50. And then now if we were to try to charge the toll to the expired vehicle, oops, it's going to give us a value error, tag is expired. So study those. I realize we're getting kind of advanced in this course, so I'm going to try to stick to those two questions as much as possible. I don't want to try to deviate too much, because now we're getting into like real world complicated examples. I realize for some of you in here, this might be only like your second semester actually programming. I know that some people in here have been doing it a long time, but I want to make this exam accessible for everybody. Okay. So study those two. Make sure you know them well. Think of the little modifications I can make to them. And I think that's pretty much it. So I guess we'll get out of here a little bit early today. Any questions on either one of these? Do I need to, since these are previous assignments that we've already done, do I need to post this? It's kind of awkward because it's in a Jupyter notebook, but I can post it if needed. Okay. And it's gonna be it's recorded, so I'll post it immediately after class. Okay, I know we did a lot this semester. To me, this worked out really well. Even though we covered kind of complicated subjects, and I'm not going to ask for you to raise your hand because I'm sure a lot of people will raise their hand and say that we covered some complicated things. But we covered a lot of real world things. We covered creating web services, which is like, I mean, that's a very current thing. I'm developing projects right now where I'm creating web services. Dealing with JSON data, which we learned dictionaries, and that maps directly. And that is pretty much the data format of the web these days is JSON. What else did we do? Did a lot of real world things. So you actually got some actual usable experience. I know sometimes in these programming classes, we have to do stuff that's a little bit manufactured to get the example simple enough that we can actually teach it. But we did some relatively complicated things in here for it. So hopefully everyone in here learned something, got a lot out of it. Next steps, if you want to continue on, is that then you would have to decide where you want to specialize. Do you want to specialize in data science? So then you start looking at libraries like Pandas, scikit-learn, maybe even TensorFlow, if you want to do neural networks. There's another library that's a little bit simpler. There's a few of them. There's PyTorch. There's a few others that are a little bit simpler than TensorFlow. Or if you wanted to start developing web apps, you might look at Django. It's pretty popular. Flask. I like Flask because it's what's called a micro framework. So it's relatively simple, and then just as you need parts, you just add them. You don't start off with this giant framework. But Django's pretty popular too. Django's pretty good if you're creating a style of app called MVC. And so I think that's pretty much it. So any questions on anything? We have a little bit of time, but I think this is a good stopping point. So next class, you know the rules. You can pretty much use almost anything, but really your best bet is just going to focus on assignment number 5 and number 6. Try to redo those assignments from memory. That'll really help you. Okay. Think about any little modifications I could make to it. And I think that's pretty much it. Okay. Thank you everybody for hanging in there. Again, like I said, I know some of this got a little bit complicated, but I think everyone, at least in this room, hung in there. And we'll knock this exam out. I think I'm caught up on grading. I know the makeup stuff I haven't graded, but everything else I think I graded. Okay, perfect. Oh yeah, don't forget to do this little thing. Don't lose points on this. This is like the easy free assignment. Okay. Don't lose points on that. That's like a free 12 points. That was just me saying, okay, I don't want to give another complicated assignment. This is just like an extra credit type, not even extra credit, but you get the idea. It's like, as long as you do it, take a couple screenshots, you're going to get full credit. So to pad your grade a little bit if you're falling a little bit behind, okay? All right, well, good luck on your exam Monday. We're going to start right into it Monday, so this might be the last time I get to talk to you this semester. And if you have questions about anything, just go ahead and email me. If I don't answer within like a day, email me again, because sometimes I just get a lot of emails. And if no other questions, I will see everybody Monday for the exam.